Surprise! I'm pregnant! Welcome back to Liv Inspired. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking all about my pregnancy journey so far. For those of you who haven't met me before, I have been a labor and delivery nurse for 12 years, and prior to that, I was a pediatric nurse. And all of that is to say that I have been baby crazy for well over a decade. I have just a deep love and obsession with newborns and kids in general, and I can honestly say that the only thing I've ever really known that I've wanted for myself is to be a mom. And I've known that since I was a child. I just really love being around kids, and I'm fascinated by them, and I just know that I have a lot of love to give to children. I also thought that I would have been in this stage of my life at least 10 years ago. So I kind of want to talk about just becoming a mom slightly older, as I'm 35 years old at the time of recording this episode, and some of the misconceptions maybe that come with that, and some of the feelings. And maybe you're somebody that's in your late 20s or your early 30s and you just really feel like that window is closing or is closed for you. And I just want to share my perspective on that. I also want to talk to you about where and how I found out, because it's a wild story, and just what my first trimester has looked like, because at this point I'm well into my second trimester and it looks a lot different. So let's backtrack a little bit and talk about maybe dreams and expectations. I very much was somebody, and I kind of hate to admit this, that when I was in college and I was in nursing school, I was also preparing to become an officer in the Navy. And I graduated, I commissioned, and I really had no long-term vision about my nursing career or about my Navy career. I knew I was down for a challenge, and I wanted to be pushed out of my comfort zone, and I wanted to travel the world, and that was all I knew at that point. But underneath that, I was also really hoping that I would meet the right person and maybe work as a Navy nurse for a few years, but then immediately start my family, like in my early to mid 20s. And as my life and different opportunities started to unfold, it just became clear that that was not the path that I was on. Fast forward to a major heartbreak that I experienced around age 29 that led me to a really dark period of feeling like I think that my opportunity to become a mom is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And now I'm terrified about how I'm going to approach any future relationship without adding all of this pressure of, I really want to be a mom. Please don't waste my time. So I share that because I know that there are people that relate to that. This feeling of when you're in your late 20s, entering your 30s, it feels like the pressure is really on. And I think a lot of that comes from societal expectations. But I just want to add that you really need to give yourself permission to let a lot of that go and trust in the timing of your own life. For as many things that I don't think that we have control over, who we'll meet, when we'll meet them, what our health looks like, there are a lot of things that we can control. Our mindset, certain aspects of our health we can control. Getting information about your body and being empowered and understanding where you're starting from, understanding your body and your cycle and all of those really specific detailed things, I think help empower you to make a decision moving forward. So I met my now husband just shortly after my 30th birthday, and the conversation about our long-term goals and whether or not we wanted kids was on the table from the beginning. I was pretty clear at letting him know, hey, my number one goal for myself is to be a mom. So I'm putting that intention out there. It's not to say that I won't date you, but I'm not going to take this seriously if you're not somebody who's also interested in being a parent, which luckily he was. That being said, I also knew that I had a lot of my own relationship trauma and things to heal from in a lot of experiences that I still wanted to have in my personal life before I was ready for that phase. So we certainly took our relationship slow, and we got married 5 years later. But that's not to say that I just put my entire dream of being a mom on the back burner while we were dating. What I did was I started to really dial in to my health, to pay close attention to the things I was using in my home for cleaning, what I was putting on my body, the type of food I was eating on a regular basis. Not extreme, but just aware. There's not a whole lot that we can control, but I think being mindful of these environmental factors is one place to start. I started to have conversations with my provider about fertility and planning, which surprisingly is not something that comes up that often in your primary care visits. I decided to pay out of pocket and get my hormones tested, I would say yearly basis, just so I had a check-in point. And there was never anything, luckily, that was concerning in those values where I felt like I needed to see a specialist or an OBGYN to have further conversation about it. But I did decide probably a year and a half before we started trying to start our family to remove my IUD birth control device so that I could start naturally tracking my cycles. And that's not an option for everybody, so I want to fully acknowledge that, but it's just something that I chose for myself. So again, I could build my confidence based on facts and information that I had. Now, we got married on February 15th, and because I had been tracking my cycle for a year and a half, I had a pretty good, consistent body of data that told me how long my cycle was and what day I usually ovulate, etc., etc. And I ended up ovulating on our wedding day, which I think is pretty wild. And lo and behold, we got pregnant on our wedding day, which I will tell you, I absolutely did not expect. I am incredibly grateful, and I was shocked. Like truly, truly shocked. In my mind and in my heart, I had prepared for this to be at least a year-long journey of just trying and figuring it out. So I do feel incredibly blessed that it happened as quickly as it did, but it was definitely not something I was mentally prepared for, to be honest with you. I had spent so much time preparing for worst case scenarios, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing until it becomes the only thing that you're thinking about and preparing for, which I can say I was starting to fall into that category. Meaning I had savings ready to go to utilize IVF if I needed it. We found out on our honeymoon because we were taking a really long trip. That was the plan the whole time, was to take 4 weeks off and travel to South America. We went to the Galapagos, we went to Patagonia, and we went to Antarctica. So as our trip started progressing, I was tracking the day that I was due to get my period, and it just didn't come. And I figured it had to do with jet lag and just all the residual stress of the wedding planning and it finally being over and just traveling. I still at no point believed that I could be pregnant, to the extent that I didn't even think to pack a pregnancy test in my luggage for our trip. And so maybe a week after I had missed my period, we decided to go to an Argentinian drugstore and purchase some pregnancy tests, which was a hilarious adventure in its own right, but purchased more than one pregnancy test. And at that point, we were maybe 3 days away from being in Antarctica. And so I told my husband, I don't think anything's gonna change between now and 3 days. So I think I'd rather just wait to take the test, which is a lot of self-control, until we're in Antarctica. One, because I didn't want to take it too early and my HCG levels wouldn't be at a point where it would be positive. And two, probably more so for just the epic factor of being able to tell my child that I found out I was pregnant with you while I was in Antarctica. So we did. The first day that we made it to the continent, because if you're familiar, you know that it takes 2 days of sailing to get to Antarctica from the southernmost tip of Argentina, and pretty rough seas. I've never experienced seasickness on the way out to Antarctica. I was feeling great. The day we got to Antarctica, the first morning I woke up, peed on the stick, and it was immediately positive. And this is a moment that I have played over and fantasized about in my mind for years leading up to this point. And I thought that I would always have this like big, explosive, joyful reaction. But I'm gonna be so honest and tell you that I think I was just in shock. Like, I almost felt numb to the experience. Maybe because there was just so much happening and so much that had happened. Like, we had just come from our wedding maybe 2 weeks before. We were traveling all around. We're in Antarctica and I'm pregnant, and I just could not, like, the information was not in my body. Like, I just felt, okay, wow. And maybe there's a level there of self-protection, of not wanting to get my hopes up. I think that probably has a bigger factor in it. And I share that because the more that I've talked about that experience, the more people have told me, yeah, I didn't really feel excited or cry or feel joyful in that moment. And because I didn't have that reaction, that's when the shame started to creep in of, you're not grateful for this experience. And it just became this like layered soundtrack that was happening in the back of my mind. So it was great to share that news with my husband, who was excited. He teared up. I think he was also a little like, okay, let's wait till we have more information. But mind you, we're in Antarctica. Like, there's nothing else to be done. All you can do is pee on the stick. In fact, I waited a few more days and I peed on another one just to make sure it was still there. Because I'm like, I have no other way of deciphering how real this is. And it's just strange. I didn't feel like I could tell anybody. I didn't feel ready to call my mom and tell her because I wanted to surprise her. And that was always a conversation I wanted to have with her in person. And so I just spent the rest of our trip in between trying to enjoy Antarctica, which was wild and epic, so many penguins, and then being like, oh my gosh, I'm like pregnant. What does that even mean? And I'll say I felt pretty good until maybe 7 days later on our voyage back across the Drake Passage to Argentina. Ooh, it was definitely more than seasickness. I vomited violently for 2 days straight, and everything just felt like a fog and a blur. I really had a hard time enjoying anything. Like, the food, which was beautiful and great, just lost its flavor. I just wanted to eat crackers. I couldn't really keep anything down. I wanted to be around people so bad, but I also couldn't pull myself out of bed. I just was really struggling, and I just wanted to be home. And we still had about another 3 or 4 days left of our trip in Buenos Aires. So I did my best to remain present to the travel and the experience that we were having, but damn was it rough. Being on one of those hop on, hop off buses and try not to vomit constantly. It was, woo, yeah. So anyway, I came home from our trip, and I think the combination of coming down from such a high experience of our wedding and all the time leading up to it, planning for it, prepping for it, this awesome event with all of our friends and family, and then this epic trip that was a month long where we went on all these adventures, and then coming back to the reality of our home and bills to pay and messes to clean up. And I just felt awful, no energy, extremely nauseous. I just didn't want to do anything, and I felt overwhelmed by everything. And again, that shame about, you shouldn't be feeling this way. This is something you've always wanted. You're so freaking lucky that this happened for you right away, really started to creep in, and it started to really impact my mental health. At which point I reached out to a therapist I'd worked with in the past, and we had a urgent meeting and just talking about all of it and just how ungrateful and overwhelmed I started to feel, and all the shame and just all the negative thought spirals that were coming in, and knowing from a clinical standpoint that there's a lot of hormone shifts going on in my body, but not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to share it with anybody, not trusting it, not trusting my body, just assuming that it was going to be a chemical pregnancy or an ectopic pregnancy or something, and just not really wanting to celebrate in any way, just feeling really guarded about it. It was tough. And I share all of that because I know now, and having very vulnerable conversations with friends, that that's not an uncommon experience, to just feel sort of numb by the whole thing. Even if you've been working and trying so hard for years, and maybe you went through a lot of infertility and IVF and it finally happened for you, I think that more often than not, people feel a little numb and guarded. And that can be really hard and conflicting, especially in social media, where you see these huge blowout, like, I'm pregnant reveals, and it's so exciting and tearful, and you're jumping around and screaming. And I didn't have that. And I always thought that I would. So fast forward, I was able to do an ultrasound around 8.5 weeks. My best friend, Katie, is a midwife, and she was able to get me in to do an ultrasound to confirm dating, and we were able to see the heartbeat. And even then, like, as she has the probe inside of me and I'm seeing this little being on the screen, it just looks like a tadpole with a heartbeat flicker, I still felt dissociated. Like, there's no way that that is happening in my own body. And maybe it's because I spend a lot of time in this environment around ultrasounds and in the hospital as part of my job, that it just didn't feel special or real. But I just looked at the screen and I told her, I can't believe this is happening in my own body. It just feels weird. It feels like you're showing me somebody else's ultrasound because I don't feel anything, which she validated is also common. But once I got my OB care established and I had my first appointment, still kind of same experience with the ultrasound. I just felt like, wow, I still cannot believe that this is happening to me. And there's also this just weird dance of, who do I share this information with? I eventually told my parents, which was really beautiful. And I told my close friends, and a bunch of my coworkers started to figure it out on their own. And it's just awkward. I think it's awkward for everybody, of like trying to determine when and how to tell people around you, because your whole world is changing, but you feel like you can't quite talk about it yet. I would say what guided that decision making for myself was, if something goes wrong and this ends up being a pregnancy loss, I'm gonna tell the people who are gonna be the same ones there supporting me if that were to happen. So I think that looks differently for everyone. I'm usually an open book. It's really hard for me to keep my own secrets. So I decided just to start sharing it openly as it came up in conversation with people. I wasn't like walking around announcing it necessarily, but as it came up, I became more and more confident with sharing it. And the more that I started to do that, I started to build more confidence within myself that, hey, this is real, this is happening, and learning to surrender to that vulnerability of, I really don't know exactly how it's going or how it's going to turn out and what it's going to look like. I still don't. So I would say somewhere around the 12 to 14 week is when I started to actually feel like myself again. I had a lot more energy. The weird cravings I was having for like pickles and lemonade and chips and crackers and bagels. Oh, bagels. A lot of that started to subside, and I finally started to feel motivated to maybe go to the gym again. So I started small with just like light spinning workouts, maybe 20 to 30 minutes. And then I gradually have gotten back into my routine of weightlifting, which is something that I practiced before pregnancy. I feel pretty confident doing it. I've researched modifications and I've gotten a lot of support from instructors at the gym. That has been incredibly empowering and life-giving to me. And I just want to acknowledge and recognize that for some people, especially if you have hyperemesis gravidarum, which is the condition where you're vomiting throughout your entire pregnancy and it's debilitating, the idea of going to the gym is just not an option. Like, you just don't feel right. And I know for me, just in those first 12 weeks, not feeling like I could participate in my life the way that I wanted to, or do the things for my mental health that make a huge difference, like going to the gym, just fed into this negativity monster and spiral that I was in. So I just want to acknowledge that everybody's experience is going to look different. And I felt really fortunate over the past 6 weeks or so that I have felt strong enough and I felt good enough to get back into those routines, and that has made a huge difference and impact for me. And that's going to look different for everybody. So I just wanted to share that journey up until now. I'm currently 18 weeks pregnant, and we're in that waiting period until we have the 20-week anatomy ultrasound. And because of my age, being 35, I'm technically elderly. So I've been offered things like genetics counseling and the NIPT, genetic blood work testing, and we're awaiting those results. So I am already learning that it doesn't really matter what level of experience or knowledge you're coming into pregnancy or childbirth or parenting with. It's all incredibly vulnerable. There are so many things that I cannot control, and every day I'm just having to confront that. There are so many days where I wake up and I feel like I'm not pregnant or this isn't real because I'm not really showing that much. And so it's really easy to gaslight myself and be like, no, I think you're just making this all up. And I'm really fortunate that my husband is a family doctor and obstetrician who happens to have his own ultrasound in the house. And it's really been an exercise of self-restraint and trusting myself to not abuse those privileges, because if I wanted to, I could look every single day with an ultrasound. And I'm really proud to say that I haven't. We've only looked maybe 2 times in 18 weeks with his home ultrasound. And yeah, anytime that I've brought it up, it's opened a discussion of what are you really seeking? If there's something going on at this stage in your pregnancy, I know that there's nothing that can be done. And that is deeply upsetting and scary and vulnerable. But instead of focusing on that, I'm choosing to focus on what if it all turns out, right? Like every week we get a little bit more information. Every week this child is growing and developing, and I just have to trust in my body. I have to trust in God's plan, and I have to know that I am a vessel for this small being to come through, and I can't control who they are genetically, and I can't control what kind of personality they're gonna have, and I can't control whether they're a boy or a girl. Like, I might have preferences, but I still don't know. And I'm choosing to lean into the beauty of the unknown, which is really new for me. I'm a Virgo, I'm a planner, I can be a little type A, and I'm really trying to just be in this experience and just feel the joy of it and really be in the gratitude of it, which I have finally arrived at a place where I can feel that fully and not constantly second guess myself, because sometimes knowledge is power and sometimes it's crippling. Because if you know too much or you've had too many experiences and you've supported a lot of other people through loss, it's really easy to assume that that's what your story is going to be too. And the reality is none of us know. None of us know what our story is going to be. And I am really excited to share this experience with you. I really thank you for tuning in and listening and being along for the ride. Those of you that know me know that this has been a long time coming, and I deeply appreciate everyone's support and reminding me to just stay in the joy and stay in the light of it and just appreciate every day for what it is, and knowing that no matter what, at this point in my pregnancy, even if it's early, we still deserve to be celebrated, and I still am a mother at this point, and I don't want to take for granted that there is a life forming inside of me, and God willing, I'll meet this person earthside and I'll have the privilege of knowing them and loving them for their whole life. But regardless of what happens, I'm just going to choose joy today, and I'm going to lean into what if it all works out.